Marcus Thompson stood at the entrance of Silverstone Corporate Tower, his weathered hands clasped behind his back, as he watched the morning rush of executives and employees stream through the glass doors. At 52 years old, he looked ordinary in his crisp security uniform, his gray hair neatly combed and his posture straight but unremarkable. To everyone who passed him daily, he was just another aging security guard counting down the days to retirement. The younger guards at the building often whispered about him during their breaks. They called him Silent Marcus because he rarely spoke unless spoken to, and even then his responses were brief and measured. While they chatted about weekend plans and complained about difficult visitors, Marcus simply stood at his post, observing everything with quiet intensity that most mistook for boredom. "I swear that old man is like a statue," joked Kevin, a 25-year-old guard who had been working at the tower for 6 months. "He never moves, never talks, never even seems to blink." "What kind of life is that?" The other guards laughed as they watched Marcus through the break room window. He was positioned near the main entrance, his eyes scanning the lobby with the same methodical pattern he had followed every day for the past 3 years. They had no idea that those eyes had once tracked enemy movements across hostile territories, or that the steady hands now checking identification badges had once held a sniper rifle with deadly precision. Marcus had chosen this job deliberately after leaving his previous life behind. The corporate security position offered him something he had craved for years: anonymity and peace. After 25 years in the British Special Air Service, including 15 years as one of their most skilled snipers, he wanted nothing more than to fade into the background of civilian life. The other guards' mockery didn't bother him. In fact, he preferred their indifference to recognition. The building housed several high-profile companies, including a major financial firm, a law office that represented international clients, and a technology company working on government contracts. Marcus had been hired not just for his military background, which was barely mentioned in his application, but because the building's management needed experienced personnel who could handle the diverse and sometimes sensitive nature of their tenants. During his interview 3 years ago, Marcus had downplayed his military service. He simply mentioned that he had served in the British Army and had experience with security protocols. The hiring manager, impressed by his calm demeanor and attention to detail, had offered him the position on the spot. Nobody bothered to dig deeper into his service record, and Marcus preferred it that way. His daily routine was simple and predictable. He arrived at 6 in the morning, relieved the night guard, and took his position at the main entrance. Throughout the day, he checked visitor badges, monitored the security cameras, and performed routine patrols of the building's lower floors. He spoke only when necessary, kept detailed logs of unusual activities, and maintained a professional distance from both colleagues and building occupants. The executives who worked in the tower barely acknowledged his existence. To them, he was part of the building's furniture, as unremarkable as the marble floors or the abstract art hanging in the lobby. They rushed past him with their phones pressed to their ears, discussing million-dollar deals and corporate strategies, never imagining that the quiet man in the security uniform could have ended their lives from 1,000 yards away without them ever knowing he was there. Marcus preferred their ignorance. The weight of his past sometimes felt heavy on his shoulders, especially during the quiet hours of his shift when his mind wandered to memories he tried to keep buried. He had seen things and done things that most people couldn't imagine, and he carried those experiences with him like invisible scars. The mundane nature of his current job was therapeutic in its own way, a stark contrast to the adrenaline and constant danger of his former life. His small apartment was equally unremarkable, furnished with basic necessities and very few personal items. He had no photographs on display, no military memorabilia, and no reminders of his past service. The only hint of his former life was a locked metal box hidden in his bedroom closet, containing his medals, commendations, and a few carefully preserved photographs of his unit. He rarely opened that box, but knowing it was there provided a strange comfort. The transformation from elite soldier to anonymous security guard had been intentional and complete. Marcus had grown tired of the violence, the constant deployments, and the toll that his specialized skills had taken on his personal life. He had never married, had no children, and had watched too many good men die in service to causes that sometimes seemed unclear. When the opportunity came to retire with full benefits, he had taken it without hesitation. Now, as he stood in the lobby of Silverstone Corporate Tower, Marcus found peace in the routine. The building's problems were simple: lost visitor badges, minor disputes between tenants, and occasional equipment malfunctions. These were challenges he could solve without violence, without risking lives, and without the moral complexity that had defined his military career. He noticed everything, though. Years of training had made observation an automatic habit. He knew which executives arrived early and which ones stayed late. He recognized the delivery drivers, the cleaning staff, and the regular visitors. He could spot potential security risks from across the lobby and had quietly prevented several minor incidents, without anyone realizing what had happened. The other guards continued to view him as a harmless old man marking time until retirement, and Marcus was content to let them think that way. He had no desire for recognition or respect from his colleagues. All he wanted was to finish each day without incident and return to the simple life he had built for himself. Little did anyone know that their quiet, unremarkable security guard was about to face a situation that would test every skill he had learned during his years as one of Britain's most deadly soldiers. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning when Marcus noticed the unusual visitor at the reception desk. The man was well-dressed in an expensive suit, carried himself with military precision, and spoke with a slight Eastern European accent. Nothing about him seemed immediately threatening, but something in his mannerisms triggered Marcus's instincts. The way he scanned the lobby, the careful positioning of his briefcase, and the subtle bulge under his left arm suggested this was no ordinary businessman. Marcus watched as the visitor signed in to meet with Jonathan Crawford, the senior partner at Morrison & Associates, the law firm that occupied the building's 15th floor. Crawford handled international contracts and had been working on a high-profile case involving testimony from a former intelligence operative. Marcus had overheard enough conversations over the past weeks to know that someone was scheduled to testify against a powerful crime syndicate, and the testimony could send several dangerous people to prison for life. The visitor's name in the logbook read Viktor Petrov, and he claimed to represent a consulting firm from Prague. But Marcus noticed inconsistencies that his colleagues missed entirely. The man's shoes were military issue, recently polished but showing wear patterns consistent with tactical training. His handwriting was deliberately neat, the kind of controlled penmanship taught to operatives to disguise their natural script. Most telling was the way he positioned himself near the elevator, maintaining visual contact with both the entrance and the emergency exits. Marcus followed his standard protocol and called upstairs to confirm the appointment. Crawford's secretary verified that Mr. Petrov was expected and had provided proper identification. Everything appeared legitimate, but Marcus's gut told him otherwise. He had learned to trust those instincts during countless missions, where the difference between a friendly contact and an enemy assassin often came down to subtle details that others overlooked. As the morning progressed, Marcus noticed more visitors arriving for the same law firm. 3 men and 1 woman, all claiming to be part of Petrov's consulting team. Each one triggered the same warning signals: professional appearance, subtle signs of tactical training, and an awareness of their surroundings that went beyond normal business caution. They were operating as a coordinated unit, though they pretended not to know each other while waiting in the lobby. The other security guards noticed nothing unusual. Kevin was distracted by his phone, scrolling through social media while occasionally glancing at the monitors. Janet, the afternoon shift supervisor, was focused on paperwork and barely looked up when the suspicious visitors passed her desk. To them, it was just another busy day at Silverstone Corporate Tower, filled with the usual parade of lawyers, consultants, and business executives. Marcus began implementing subtle counter-surveillance measures without drawing attention to his actions. He adjusted his patrol route to get a better look at each visitor, memorizing their faces and noting details about their behavior. He used the reflection in the lobby's polished surfaces to observe them from multiple angles and started tracking their movement patterns through the building's security cameras. During his lunch break, Marcus accessed the building's computer system and researched the consulting firm that Petrov claimed to represent. What he found confirmed his suspicions. The company existed only on paper, with a generic website created just weeks earlier, and no verifiable business history. The address listed for their Prague office was actually a small apartment building, and none of the phone numbers connected to real people. While conducting this research, Marcus also discovered that Crawford's star witness was scheduled to arrive at the building that afternoon for a final preparation meeting before testifying in court the next day. The witness, a former intelligence operative named Sarah Chen, had been in protective custody for months and would be accompanied by federal marshals. Her testimony was crucial to the prosecution's case and would expose a network of international criminals who had killed to protect their secrets. Marcus realized he was looking at a classic assassination setup. The fake consulting team had positioned themselves in the building hours before their target would arrive, giving them time to scout escape routes and prepare their attack. They were professionals, probably hired killers sent to eliminate Chen before she could testify. The fact that they had managed to get legitimate appointments, with Crawford suggested they had inside information, and had been planning this operation for weeks. The afternoon brought no relief from Marcus's growing concerns. The suspicious visitors remained in the building, apparently engaged in lengthy meetings with various staff members at the law firm. But Marcus's monitoring of the security cameras revealed that they were actually conducting reconnaissance, mapping the floor layout, and identifying security vulnerabilities. One of them spent an unusually long time in the building's restroom, likely hiding equipment or weapons for later use. At 3 o'clock, Marcus received notification that Sarah Chen and her protective detail would arrive within the hour. Standard protocol required him to clear a path from the parking garage to the express elevator, ensuring minimal exposure as they moved the witness through the building. But Marcus knew that these precautions would be useless against a well-coordinated assassination team already positioned inside the building. He faced an impossible decision. If he raised an alarm based on his suspicions alone, he would have to explain how a simple security guard had identified a sophisticated operation that had fooled law enforcement professionals. Revealing his true background would destroy the quiet life he had built, and potentially put him back on the radar of people who might want him dead. But if he remained silent and Sarah Chen was killed, he would carry the weight of that failure for the rest of his life. Marcus had spent years learning to make split-second decisions under pressure, and those skills had not diminished during his time as a civilian. He began developing a plan that would allow him to intervene without revealing his true capabilities. He would need to be careful, methodical, and absolutely certain about his actions, because once he stepped out of his role as the quiet, unremarkable security guard, there would be no going back. As the hour approached for Sarah Chen's arrival, Marcus made his choice. He would not stand by and watch an innocent person be murdered, even if it meant risking everything he had worked to build. The deadly skills he had tried to leave behind were about to become necessary once again, and Marcus Thompson was ready to become the soldier he had once been. Marcus began his preparation with the methodical precision that had kept him alive through dozens of dangerous missions. First, he needed to confirm the exact nature of the threat and gather intelligence on his opponents without alerting them to his awareness. Using his access to the building's security system, he began tracking each member of the assassination team through the camera network, mapping their positions and identifying their probable roles in the operation. Viktor Petrov appeared to be the team leader, maintaining communication with the others through subtle hand signals and brief text messages. The woman who had signed in as Elena Kozlov was positioned near the stairwell access and seemed to be their lookout and communication specialist. 2 other men had spread out across different floors, creating overlapping fields of observation and potential shooting positions. Their coordination was flawless, the kind of tactical discipline that only came from extensive military training. Marcus used his security rounds as cover to conduct close reconnaissance on each team member. When he passed Elena in the hallway, he noticed the small communication device in her ear and the way she instinctively shifted to keep her weapon side away from him. One of the men, calling himself Alex Novak, had positioned himself near the elevator bank on the 14th floor, where he could observe anyone moving between floors. The 4th team member, Dmitry Volkov, had taken a position in the law firm's waiting area, giving him direct access to Crawford's office. During his observations, Marcus identified several weapons and pieces of equipment that the team had managed to smuggle into the building. Elena carried a ceramic knife that wouldn't trigger metal detectors, while Alex had a disassembled pistol hidden in his briefcase. Dmitri appeared to have planted something behind the water cooler in the waiting area, probably an explosive device designed to create chaos and confusion during their escape. Petrov's weapon was harder to identify, but Marcus suspected he was carrying poison or another silent killing method. As 4 o'clock approached, Marcus received confirmation that Sarah Chen's convoy was en route to the building. The federal marshals had followed standard protocol, varying their route and timing to avoid predictability. But Marcus realized that the assassination team had anticipated this and positioned themselves to strike regardless of which entrance the witness used or what time she arrived. The building's head of security, Robert Manning, was completely unaware of the danger developing under his nose. Manning was a decent man but had no military experience and relied heavily on technology and procedures rather than human intuition. Marcus had tried to hint at his concerns earlier in the day, but Manning dismissed them as the paranoid worries of an aging guard. The other security personnel were equally oblivious, focused on their routine tasks and paperwork. Marcus made the decision to act independently. He began by creating subtle disruptions to the assassination team's plan without revealing his hand. First, he triggered a false fire alarm on the 14th floor, forcing Alex to evacuate his position and breaking the team's carefully planned coordination. When Alex tried to return to his post, Marcus intercepted him at the elevator and engaged him in conversation about the faulty alarm system, preventing him from resuming his surveillance position. Next, Marcus approached Dmitri in the law firm's waiting area, claiming that he needed to inspect the water cooler, following complaints about the water quality. As Dmitri watched nervously, Marcus pretended to examine the cooler while actually identifying and mentally mapping the location of the hidden explosive device. He couldn't remove it without alerting the entire team, but knowing its exact position would be crucial for his next moves. The witness convoy arrived at exactly 4:15, using the building's underground parking garage as planned. Marcus watched through the security cameras as 3 black SUVs entered the garage, followed by Sarah Chen and her protective detail. The federal marshals moved with professional efficiency, but they had no idea that their every move was being observed by hostile forces already positioned throughout the building. Marcus positioned himself at the elevator bank on the ground floor, ostensibly performing routine security duties but actually preparing to intercept any threats that might emerge during the witness transport. He had memorized the building's floor plans years ago and knew every possible route the assassination team might use to reach their target. As the elevator carrying Sarah Chen and the marshals began its ascent to the 15th floor, the assassination team sprang into action. Elena moved toward the stairwell, intending to cut off any escape route. Petrov left his meeting room and headed toward Crawford's office, where he would have access to the witness during her preparation session. The carefully orchestrated plan was unfolding exactly as they had rehearsed. Marcus had seconds to make his move. Years of combat experience had taught him that successful operations often came down to timing and the element of surprise. The assassination team expected resistance from the federal marshals, but they had no reason to suspect that the quiet security guard possessed the skills to disrupt their mission. He started with Elena, using his security radio to request her assistance with a situation in the basement. When she hesitated, Marcus played his role perfectly, appearing confused and slightly frustrated as he repeated his request for help. Elena's training told her to maintain her position, but her cover identity as a visiting consultant required her to cooperate with building security. She reluctantly followed Marcus toward the stairwell, not realizing she was walking into a trap. Once they were alone in the stairwell, Marcus's demeanor changed completely. With movements too fast for Elena to counter, he disarmed her of both her ceramic knife and communication device, then used a sleeper hold to render her unconscious. The entire encounter lasted less than 30 seconds and was conducted in complete silence. Marcus secured Elena in a maintenance closet and confiscated her equipment, eliminating one member of the assassination team without alerting the others. Alex was Marcus's next target. Using his master key access, Marcus triggered the building's emergency lighting system on the 14th floor, creating confusion and forcing Alex to investigate what appeared to be a technical malfunction. When Alex approached the electrical panel, Marcus appeared behind him wearing the building maintenance coveralls he kept in his security office. Alex never saw the attack coming and joined Elena in unconsciousness before he could raise an alarm. 2 down, 2 to go. But the most dangerous part of Marcus's mission was just beginning. Petrov and Dmitri were both positioned near Sarah Chen's location, and any further delays would put the witness in immediate danger. Marcus had to move fast, but he also had to be certain that his actions wouldn't result in civilian casualties or alert other criminals who might be monitoring the operation from outside the building. The quiet security guard was gone, replaced by the deadly SAS operative who had once been considered one of Britain's most valuable assets. Marcus Thompson was back in action, and the assassination team was about to discover that they had made a fatal mistake by underestimating their opposition. Marcus moved through the building with the fluid efficiency of a predator hunting experienced prey. His transformation from mild-mannered security guard to lethal operative was complete, every muscle memory from his SAS training flooding back as if he had never left the service. He used the building's service corridors and maintenance passages, routes that only he knew existed, to approach the 15th floor without being detected by the remaining assassination team members. Through his confiscated communication device from Elena, Marcus could hear the growing concern in the team's radio chatter. Petrov had noticed that 2 of his operatives had stopped responding to check-in calls, and Dmitri was reporting unusual activity in the building's security systems. They knew something was wrong, but they couldn't identify the source of the threat. Their training told them to abort the mission, but their orders were clear. Sarah Chen had to die before she could testify. Marcus reached the 15th floor using the building's freight elevator, which opened directly into the law firm's back offices. The federal marshals had established their security perimeter in the main reception area, but they had no coverage of the building's service areas. This gap in their protection was exactly what the assassination team had planned to exploit, and it was the same weakness that Marcus would now use to hunt his prey. Dmitri was Marcus's primary concern because of his proximity to the explosive device and his position within the law firm's offices. Using the building's internal camera system, Marcus tracked Dmitri's movements as he tried to maintain his cover while preparing for the assassination. Dmitri had convinced Crawford's secretary that he needed to use the copy machine, giving him a legitimate reason to move around the office while actually conducting final reconnaissance on his target. Marcus entered the law firm through the office kitchen, moving silently past unaware staff members who were too busy with their daily routines to notice an additional security guard in their workspace. His years of urban combat training allowed him to navigate the office environment without drawing attention, appearing to belong wherever he happened to be at any given moment. He found Dmitri alone in the copy room, frantically trying to establish radio contact with his missing team members while maintaining his facade as a visiting consultant. Marcus entered the room casually, appearing to conduct a routine security check of the office equipment. Dmitri looked up nervously, his hand instinctively moving toward his concealed weapon. "Everything all right in here, sir?" Marcus asked in his most professional security guard voice, stepping closer while appearing completely unthreatening. "Yes, just some trouble with the machine," Dmitri replied, his accent more pronounced under stress. "Perhaps you could help?" Marcus nodded and moved to examine the copy machine, putting himself within striking distance of his target. In one fluid motion, he grabbed Dmitri's gun hand while simultaneously striking a pressure point that rendered the assassin's arm useless. Before Dmitri could cry out, Marcus had him in a chokehold that cut off both his air supply and his ability to speak. "Professional advice," Marcus whispered as Dmitri struggled weakly. "Next time you plant explosives, make sure they're not visible to someone who knows what to look for." Dmitri's eyes widened in shock as he realized that his cover had been completely blown. Marcus maintained pressure until the assassin lost consciousness, then secured him with zip ties from his security kit. 3 down, 1 to go, but the most dangerous opponent remained. Viktor Petrov was a different class of enemy entirely. Unlike his subordinates, who were skilled but predictable operatives, Petrov showed signs of elite training and battlefield experience. Marcus could tell from his movement patterns and decision-making that he was dealing with someone who had survived multiple high-stakes operations. This would require a more sophisticated approach. Through the security cameras, Marcus watched as Petrov abandoned his original plan and began moving toward the building's emergency exits. The team leader had recognized that his mission was compromised and was attempting to extract himself while potentially creating maximum casualties as a diversion. This was the most dangerous phase of any failed operation, when desperate professionals became unpredictable and willing to accept massive collateral damage. Marcus used his security radio to contact the federal marshals, but he couldn't reveal the true nature of the threat without exposing his own background. Instead, he reported a possible security breach and recommended that they move Sarah Chen to a more secure location immediately. The marshals were well trained and took his warning seriously, beginning preparations to relocate the witness to a safe room on a different floor. Petrov intercepted the radio transmission and realized that building security was more aware than he had anticipated. He changed tactics again, moving away from the emergency exits and toward the main elevator bank. Marcus recognized the shift in strategy. Petrov was planning to target the witness during her relocation, using the confusion of the move to get close enough for a guaranteed kill. The deadly game of cat and mouse moved through the building's corridors as both men used their training to outmaneuver each other. Marcus had the advantage of knowing the building's layout intimately, but Petrov had the benefit of explosive devices and backup weapons that he had hidden throughout his original operation area. Each man respected the other's skills while remaining completely committed to their conflicting objectives. Marcus intercepted Petrov near the main elevator bank, timing his approach to coincide with the witness relocation. To any observer, it appeared to be a routine encounter between building security and a visiting consultant. But both men recognized each other as professionals and began a careful dance of positioning and psychological warfare. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your identification again," Marcus said politely, while subtly blocking Petrov's access to the elevator controls. "Of course," Petrov replied, reaching slowly for his wallet while his other hand moved toward his concealed weapon, "though I believe I showed it to you earlier today." "Standard procedure during security alerts," Marcus explained, his own hand casually resting near his radio and the tactical baton on his security belt. "I'm sure you understand the need for caution." Both men smiled pleasantly while calculating angles, distances, and timing for what they both knew would be a lethal confrontation. Years of training had prepared them for exactly this moment, the split second when professional courtesy would give way to deadly force, and only one of them would walk away from the encounter. The elevator doors opened behind Marcus, and he could hear the federal marshals approaching with their witness. In seconds, Sarah Chen would be in the line of fire, and Petrov would make his final, desperate move to complete his mission. Marcus had to end this confrontation immediately, but he needed to do it without revealing the true extent of his capabilities to the federal agents who would witness whatever happened next. The confrontation erupted with the sudden violence that Marcus had been anticipating. Petrov made his move as the elevator doors opened, drawing a concealed pistol while lunging toward the emerging group of federal marshals and their witness. But Marcus was already in motion, his body moving with the practiced efficiency of countless similar encounters during his military career. Marcus struck Petrov's gun hand with his tactical baton, sending the weapon skittering across the marble floor, while simultaneously grabbing the assassin's collar and using his momentum to throw him away from the elevator. The federal marshals reacted instantly to the threat, drawing their own weapons and shouting commands while pushing Sarah Chen back into the elevator for protection. Petrov rolled with the throw and came up in a combat stance, pulling a backup weapon from an ankle holster while scanning for cover positions. He was clearly surprised by the security guard's speed and skill, but his training kicked in as he adapted to the unexpected opposition. Marcus could see the reassessment happening in Petrov's eyes as the assassin realized he was facing a far more dangerous opponent than he had anticipated. "Federal agents." "Drop your weapon," shouted Marshal Davies, the lead protective agent, as he aimed at Petrov while trying to understand what was happening. Petrov ignored the command and fired 2 quick shots in Marcus's direction before diving behind the marble reception desk. His bullet struck the wall where Marcus had been standing, but the former SAS sniper had already moved to a flanking position, using the building's architectural features to stay ahead of his opponent's targeting solutions. Marcus knew he had to end this confrontation quickly and decisively. The federal marshals were trained professionals, but they were operating with incomplete information and couldn't distinguish between the real threat and a security guard who seemed to be involved in a gunfight. If the situation continued much longer, Marcus risked being shot by the very people he was trying to protect. Using a technique he had perfected during urban combat operations in Afghanistan, Marcus created a distraction by triggering the building's fire suppression system. Water began pouring from the ceiling sprinklers, reducing visibility and forcing everyone to adjust their positions. In the confusion, Marcus closed the distance to Petrov's position with movements that were invisible to the federal agents, but perfectly calculated to give him a tactical advantage. Petrov was good, but Marcus had spent years fighting opponents who were just as skilled and far more experienced. When the assassin emerged from behind the reception desk to take another shot, Marcus was waiting for him with a move that combined precision striking and weapon disarmament. Petrov's second gun joined the first on the floor, and a sharp blow to his solar plexus left him gasping and unable to continue fighting. "Suspect is down and disarmed," Marcus called out to the federal marshals, his voice carrying the calm authority that came from handling countless similar situations. "Building is secure." Marshal Davies approached cautiously, his weapon still drawn as he tried to process what had just happened. A quiet security guard had single-handedly neutralized a professional assassin in less than 30 seconds, using techniques that suggested extensive combat training. The other marshals maintained their defensive positions while Davies began questioning Marcus about the incident. "Sir, I'm going to need you to explain exactly what just happened here," Davies said, his tone respectful but demanding. "This man was armed and appeared to be targeting our witness. How did you know to intercept him?" Marcus had prepared for this moment throughout the entire operation. His response had to satisfy the federal agents without revealing classified information about his background or compromising the quiet life he had built for himself. He chose his words carefully, sticking as close to the truth as possible while omitting the details that would raise too many questions. "I noticed suspicious behavior from several visitors earlier today," Marcus explained. "Their credentials didn't check out properly, and their movement patterns suggested coordinated surveillance. I tried to report my concerns through normal channels, but when I saw this individual drawing a weapon near your witness, I had to act." Davies nodded slowly, recognizing the professionalism in Marcus's response, while clearly suspecting there was more to the story. "Your actions probably saved lives today. What's your background?" "Military?" "British Army, retired," Marcus replied, which was technically accurate even if it left out the most important details. "Basic security training and some experience with threat assessment." As the federal agents secured the crime scene and called for backup, Marcus quietly informed them about the other 3 members of the assassination team that he had neutralized throughout the building. He led them to Elena and Alex, who were still unconscious in their respective hiding places, and to Dmitri, who was secured in the copy room. He also provided detailed information about the explosive device behind the water cooler, which the FBI's bomb disposal team would later confirm was designed to create maximum casualties and confusion. The scope of the assassination plot became clear as federal investigators processed the evidence. The team had been planning their operation for weeks, using inside information to position themselves perfectly for the attack. Without Marcus's intervention, Sarah Chen would have been killed, and several innocent bystanders would have died in the resulting explosion and gunfire. Sarah Chen herself was shaken but unharmed, protected by the quick thinking of both Marcus and the federal marshals. She thanked Marcus personally before being relocated to a secure federal facility, where she would remain until after her testimony. Her case would proceed as planned, and the criminals she was exposing would face justice because one quiet security guard had recognized the threat and acted decisively. The building's management was stunned by the revelation that their unremarkable security guard had prevented a major terrorist incident. Robert Manning, the head of security, struggled to understand how Marcus had identified and neutralized a sophisticated assassination team without any of the building's expensive security technology detecting the threat. "I don't understand how you saw all this," Manning said as they reviewed the incident reports. "We have cameras, metal detectors, visitor screening protocols. How did 4 armed assassins get past all of that? And how did you know they were here?" Marcus shrugged with the same quiet demeanor he had always shown. "Sometimes you just have to trust your instincts and pay attention to details that don't seem right. The technology is helpful, but it can't replace human observation and experience." The other security guards, who had spent years mocking Marcus as a boring old man, counting down to retirement, were speechless as they learned what had happened. Kevin, the young guard who had called him Silent Marcus, stared in amazement as federal agents treated their colleague as a hero who had prevented a national tragedy. But Marcus was already thinking about returning to his normal routine. The excitement was over. The threat was eliminated, and he wanted nothing more than to fade back into the anonymity that had given him peace for the past 3 years. The deadly skills that had made him one of Britain's most effective soldiers had served their purpose one more time, and now he was ready to put them away again. The investigation that followed the assassination attempt brought unwanted attention to Marcus's quiet life. Federal agents interviewed him extensively, trying to understand how a building security guard had detected and neutralized a professional killing team that had fooled experienced law enforcement officers. Marcus answered their questions truthfully but selectively, revealing only what was necessary while protecting the classified details of his SAS background, FBI. Special Agent Rebecca Torres led the investigation and quickly realized that Marcus Thompson was far more than he appeared to be. Her background checks revealed his British Army service, but hit classified walls when she tried to access specific details about his military specialty. The gaps in his official record, combined with his demonstrated combat skills, told her everything she needed to know about his true background. "You know I can't get access to your full service record," Torres said during their final interview, "but I've been in this business long enough to recognize when someone has capabilities that go beyond basic military training. The way you handled that situation was textbook special operations." Marcus maintained his diplomatic silence, neither confirming nor denying her assessment. "I served my country for 25 years and learned to pay attention to details that might keep people safe. That's all I can tell you, Agent Torres." Torres respected his position and didn't push for information she knew she wouldn't receive. Instead, she focused on documenting the facts of the case and ensuring that Marcus received appropriate recognition for his actions. The assassination team had been part of a larger international criminal organization, and stopping their mission had protected not only Sarah Chen but potentially dozens of other witnesses and investigators working on related cases. The media attention was exactly what Marcus had hoped to avoid. Local news stations picked up the story of the heroic security guard who had prevented a terrorist attack, and reporters began asking questions about his background and motivations. Marcus declined all interview requests and asked building management to refer media inquiries to the FBI, but he couldn't escape the fact that his anonymity had been permanently shattered. His fellow security guards struggled to adjust to the revelation that their quiet colleague was actually a highly trained operative with a distinguished military background. Kevin approached him during a break, clearly embarrassed about his previous mockery and uncertain about how to interact with someone he now knew could have killed him without breaking a sweat. "Marcus, I owe you an apology," Kevin said awkwardly. "All those times we joked about you being boring or called you Silent Marcus. We had no idea what kind of person you really are." "You don't owe me anything," Marcus replied with his characteristic calm. "I chose to keep my background private, and I gave you no reason to think I was anything other than what I appeared to be. Your reaction was perfectly reasonable based on the information you had. But the dynamic had changed irrevocably." The other guards now treated Marcus with a mixture of respect and nervous curiosity that made normal interactions impossible. They wanted to ask questions about his military service and learn details about his training, but they were also intimidated by the knowledge that they were working alongside someone who had lived in a world they couldn't imagine. Building management offered Marcus a promotion to head of security, along with a substantial salary increase and expanded responsibilities. The executives who had previously ignored him now wanted to capitalize on his expertise and use his reputation to enhance their corporate security profile. But Marcus declined their offers, explaining that he was satisfied with his current position and responsibilities. "I appreciate the recognition," Marcus told Robert Manning during their meeting about the promotion. "But I took this job because it offered me a simple, peaceful work environment. I'm not interested in additional responsibilities or public attention. I just want to finish my time here quietly and retire as planned." Manning struggled to understand why someone with Marcus's background would prefer to remain an entry-level security guard, but he respected Marcus's decision and ensured that his wishes for privacy were honored as much as possible. The building's executives were disappointed that they couldn't use Marcus's heroics for marketing purposes, but they also recognized that pressuring him would likely result in losing their most valuable security asset. The assassination plot's aftermath revealed the scope of the criminal organization that had targeted Sarah. Chandra international law enforcement agencies arrested dozens of suspects in coordinated raids across multiple countries, disrupting money laundering operations, human trafficking networks, and illegal arms sales. Marcus's intervention had not only saved one witness, but had preserved crucial testimony that brought down an entire criminal empire. Sarah Chen's testimony proceeded as scheduled, and the criminals she exposed received lengthy prison sentences that effectively dismantled their organization. She sent Marcus a private thank you letter, expressing gratitude that went far beyond simple appreciation for his professional actions. Her words made clear that she understood the personal cost of his decision to intervene and the sacrifice he had made by revealing his capabilities. Federal authorities offered Marcus consulting opportunities and positions with various agencies that could benefit from his expertise. Agent Torres personally extended an offer for him to join the FBI's counterterrorism unit, where his skills would be invaluable in protecting other high-profile witnesses and investigating international criminal networks. But Marcus declined every opportunity, remaining committed to his goal of civilian anonymity. The psychological impact of returning to action after 3 years of peaceful civilian life was more significant than Marcus had anticipated. The adrenaline and hyper-awareness that had sustained him during the crisis gave way to a period of reflection and adjustment as he processed what had happened. The muscle memory of combat operations came back easily, but so did the emotional weight of violence and the complex moral calculations that defined his former profession. Marcus found himself remembering other operations, other missions where his actions had determined who lived and who died. The assassination team he had stopped were criminals who deserved to be in prison, but they were also human beings with families and histories that he would never know. The clean resolution of preventing their attack couldn't completely offset the burden of using lethal skills that he had hoped to leave behind permanently. His small apartment felt different now, no longer the simple refuge where he could escape from his past, but a place where he had to confront the reality that some aspects of his former life would always be part of who he was. The locked metal box in his bedroom closet seemed to represent more than just memorabilia. It contained pieces of his identity that could never be completely separated from his civilian persona. Despite the successful outcome and the recognition he had received, Marcus began seriously considering whether he could continue working at Silverstone Corporate Tower. The building would never again be the anonymous environment where he could blend into the background, and his colleagues would never again see him as just another security guard marking time until retirement. The peaceful life he had built was gone, replaced by something more complex and emotionally demanding. 6 months after the assassination attempt, Marcus stood once again at his post in the lobby of Silverstone Corporate Tower, but everything had changed in ways both obvious and subtle. The building's security protocols had been completely overhauled based on lessons learned from the incident, and Marcus had quietly consulted on improvements that would prevent similar threats from going undetected. His insights had transformed their security from a reactive system focused on technology to a proactive approach that emphasized human observation and threat assessment. The other security guards had gradually adjusted to working alongside someone they now understood to be a highly trained professional. The nervous respect had evolved into genuine admiration and a desire to learn from his experience. Marcus found himself becoming an unofficial mentor, sharing basic situational awareness techniques and security principles without revealing classified methods or compromising his background. Kevin had become particularly dedicated to improving his skills, transforming from a casual employee into someone genuinely committed to professional security work. "I never realized how much I wasn't seeing," Kevin admitted during one of their conversations. "You've taught me to notice patterns and details that I used to completely miss. It's like learning to see the world in a completely different way." Marcus appreciated his colleagues' newfound professionalism, but he also recognized that their respect came with expectations he wasn't entirely comfortable meeting. They wanted him to be their leader and teacher, roles that required him to step further away from the anonymity he had originally sought. The simple job of checking badges and monitoring cameras had evolved into something more complex and demanding. The building's executives continued to pressure Marcus to accept expanded responsibilities, offering him positions that would utilize his expertise in corporate security consulting and threat assessment. They saw him as a valuable asset who could enhance their reputation and provide services to other clients facing similar security challenges. But Marcus remained committed to his original goals, politely declining opportunities that would thrust him back into a world of constant vigilance and professional violence. Sarah Chen's successful testimony had led to convictions that dismantled the criminal organization responsible for the assassination attempt. International law enforcement agencies credited Marcus's intervention with preventing not only her murder, but also the potential deaths of dozens of other witnesses and investigators. The ripple effects of his actions continued to generate arrests and prosecutions around the world, validating his decision to act despite the personal costs. Agent Torres visited Marcus periodically, ostensibly to update him on related investigations, but actually to maintain contact with someone whose skills might be needed for future operations. She never directly recruited him, but she made sure he knew that federal agencies remained interested in his expertise and would welcome his involvement in appropriate cases. Marcus appreciated her professionalism while making clear that his intervention at Silverstone had been a unique circumstance rather than a return to active service. The media attention had eventually died down, but Marcus's actions had become part of the building's history and reputation. New employees heard stories about the quiet security guard who had saved lives and stopped terrorists, creating a legend that bore little resemblance to Marcus's own modest recollection of events. He became uncomfortable with the hero worship and found himself missing the days when he was just another unremarkable face in the corporate environment. Marcus's personal reflection on the incident led him to a deeper understanding of his own motivations and limitations. He realized that his years of military service had instilled values and skills that couldn't be completely set aside, even when he tried to live as a civilian. The decision to intervene hadn't been a choice between his old life and his new one. It had been an expression of principles that defined who he was regardless of his job title or circumstances. The locked metal box in his bedroom closet had been opened more frequently in recent months as Marcus reconnected with aspects of his identity that he had tried to suppress. His military medals and commendations reminded him of accomplishments that went beyond individual heroics, to include years of service protecting others and defending principles he still believed in. The photographs of his former unit showed him surrounded by men who had shared similar experiences and understood the weight of their responsibilities. Marcus began corresponding with a few of his former SAS colleagues, reconnecting with friendships that had been important to him during his years of service. These conversations helped him process his recent experiences and provided perspective from others who had successfully transitioned to civilian life while maintaining their core values and capabilities. He learned that many of them had faced similar challenges in balancing their desire for normalcy with their continued commitment to protecting others. The decision about his future at Silverstone Corporate Tower became clear gradually rather than through any single moment of revelation. Marcus realized that he could continue working there successfully, but only if he accepted that his role had permanently evolved beyond simple security guard duties. He would always be the person others turned to during crises, and he would always carry the responsibility that came with his unique background and capabilities. After discussing the situation with building management, Marcus accepted a modified position that acknowledged his expertise while respecting his desire for routine work. He became the building's senior security advisor, maintaining his regular duties while also providing consultation on security improvements and threat assessment. The arrangement allowed him to use his skills constructively without returning to the high-stress environment of active military or law enforcement operations. Marcus's story became a quiet legend within the security industry, shared among professionals who understood the challenges of transitioning from military to civilian careers while maintaining readiness to act when circumstances demanded. His experience demonstrated that heroism often came from ordinary people who possessed extraordinary skills and the moral courage to use them when necessary. As he stood at his familiar post in the lobby, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him from elite soldier to anonymous security guard to reluctant hero, and finally to someone who had found peace with all aspects of his identity. The other guards still called him Silent Marcus, but now the nickname carried respect rather than mockery. He remained quiet and observant, but his colleagues understood that his silence came from confidence and experience, rather than disinterest or boredom. The transformation was complete, but it hadn't led him back to his former life or forward to something entirely different. Instead, it had helped him find a balance between the skills he had developed as a soldier and the peace he sought as a civilian. Marcus Thompson would never again be just an ordinary security guard, but he had learned that extraordinary people could find meaning and satisfaction in ordinary work when they remained true to their principles and ready to act when others needed protection. The quiet guard who had once been mocked by his colleagues had earned their respect not through intimidation or displays of power, but through the quiet competence and moral courage that defined true professionalism. In saving Sarah Chen and stopping the assassination team, he had also saved himself from a life of regret and shown that heroes weren't always people seeking recognition or glory, but sometimes ordinary individuals who simply refused to stand by when others were in danger.